What's up, good people? Welcome to a late night edition of the Lightning Round podcast. Here live, really after hours, 8 p.m. here on the West Coast for Jamie and I. And today, we're going to be talking about free agent signings here to help improve this Chargers roster. What I think you guys should know off the top here is we went through this exercise as if we were the GM, knowing that the Chargers don't have a lot of money. So this is going to be some low end. We're going to go bargain shopping here, supermarket sweep kind of signings here. You're not going to hear any of the big name signings here. You're not going to hear any flashy names. It's going to be a lot of depth guys. And this is kind of the exercise we're going to go through.
Yeah, I think I would just add too. My mic seems really loud.
It is really loud. It is really loud.
Is that better?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just add too that in addition to the Chargers not having money, if you're not shopping at the top of this free agent class this year, then your options are seriously limited.
Yeah.
So, and the Chargers spent big last offseason. I feel like this is an offseason that's probably better spent looking to fill certain depth needs, so that you don't go into the draft needing a whole bunch of stuff and you can focus on some key positions. So I think that's probably the route that we both took heading into this, is kind of just, filling strategic depth needs so they can focus on bigger needs in the draft.
Yeah. And we talked about internal free agents. This is kind of the offseason where the Chargers will need to sign some of their own guys and then fill out some depth here with some of the guys that maybe Jamie and I name here. Also, we're going to go over some of the key positions here on both offense and defense. We're not going to cover all of offense, all of defense. It's a wild night over at Jamie's house. But we're also we're not going to be talking about signing every single guy that's on these lists. It's going to have to be just pick a few of these guys that Jamie and I are going to mention here as well. So even though we're going to go over, 8 or 9 different position groups here on offense and defense, this isn't sign all of these guys. This is, pick the best option here. We're going to give you an option. Jamie's going to give you his option. I'm going to give you my option. I think we only doubled up on one position group, but for the most part, we're going to give you different options of guys that we prefer. So we're going to start on the defensive side, which was going to be our podcast last week, and then move on to offense. In fact, we kind of moved the defensive group. I'm going to mute you real quick, Jamie. We moved the defensive podcast over and combined it with the offensive podcast just because we're going to be bargain shopping here. We felt like it would kind of be a letdown to just do one defense and one offense without any real key names here. So we wanted to highlight them all in one podcast. So that's what we're going to do here. Offense and defense, we're combining them all. And then next week, look out. It's going to be all draft for the next couple weeks. So right now we're going to go over defense and offense. I'm going to unmute Jamie and I'm going to let him start. We're going to start with edge players. Jamie, give me who you have on the edge as a free agent sign.
So I was looking for somebody on the edge who is relatively young, who has some experience as a primary or secondary edge rusher, but maybe needs to rebuild some value on a 1, maybe 2-year deal. So this is somebody who I think we're all familiar with because he played in the division, played for the Broncos. He was traded to Denver last year, or to Pittsburgh last year. And I'm talking about 25-year-old edge player Malik Reed. This is somebody who had 13 sacks between 2020 and 2021. He was then traded to Pittsburgh last year, took an immediate pay cut, became their edge 3 or 4, and vanished. and went from averaging 6.5 sacks over the previous 2 years to getting 1 sack last year. So this is somebody who had a huge drop in production. He's somebody who has always had his greatest success being kind of the wingman to a primary edge rusher. So I feel like he fits in really well. He sets the edge well. He can get to the quarterback. He can play a little bit of linebacker if you need him to. So Malik Reed is my choice. I don't think he's going to command a whole lot. He made around $1.5 million last year and didn't do a whole lot and has never shown that he can be the guy. So I have a 1-year deal for $3.5 million for Malik Reed, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million or $2 million guaranteed to sweeten the pot a little bit to get him in the door. Maybe you can get him in for 2 years, $6 or $7 million, and see how that goes. But I feel like Reed is a guy. He's only 25. He has a lot to prove. He certainly would be an upgrade over Chris Rumpf. And he's a guy who I think could offer some of the things that Kyle Van Noy offered, specifically off the edge, and give them some juice off the edge and maybe not force them to have to take an edge early in the draft and kind of solidify a need early on.
Okay. All right. Well, so you've got Malik Reed. I've got a different guy here. I went kind of a different route, and I picked kind of a unique linebacker, and I picked the Dolphins linebacker, Landon Roberts. By the way, we're going outside the Chargers and getting outside free agents here with this exercise we're doing here. So Landon Roberts, a unique linebacker. He played some inside linebacker, struggled in coverage, but where he excelled is in the run game and getting after the quarterback. The Dolphins this past season used him more as a blitzer, and he peaked collecting his most sacks of his career, 4.5. He had 107 tackles. Before that, his highs were 2 sacks and 83 tackles. So he really had his best year of his career as a blitzer. Teams are going to be split on Roberts. They're going to either have him as an inside linebacker or an edge guy. Either way, in my mind, he's a rotational guy in the NFL. I got him pinned at $2.5 to $3 million per year. He's probably going to get what Denzel Perryman got with the Raiders. Roberts got a little less tackles, but more sacks. The numbers are pretty close. So I think we're in the neighborhood there. Because he's a younger linebacker, he probably wants a 2-year deal. So I'm thinking a 2-year, $5.5 million deal. Maybe give yourself an out after year 1 if it doesn't work out. But he was a captain for the Dolphins. Leader of the Miami defense, kind of a veteran signing here for the Chargers, and he fills 2 needs. He would be the edge. He would be the edge 3-4, depending on if the Chargers re-sign Kyle Van Noy, and then he could also provide some inside linebacker depth as well on early rundowns. So here I've got kind of a guy that I feel like could fill 2 different needs on a really cheap deal. $3 million a year max, really. I'm looking at a 5.5, so just under $3 million per year. But a guy, again, he struggled in coverage, but as a run defender was very good and showed that he can get after the quarterback. So, like Jamie mentioned, this is like in Jamie's scenario here, I think an upgrade over Chris Rumpf. And now you filled in some edge depth, some linebacker depth. Maybe you can wait a little bit on linebacker, wait a little bit on edge with a depth signing with a guy like Landon Roberts.
Yeah, I actually considered Roberts for the next position group, for the linebacker group on my list. He's a guy that I've always liked. I think he's smart. He can play multiple positions in the defense, like you said. Isn't he like 29 or 30, or is he younger?
I think he's younger. I'll look it up, but this actually might be a second contract, so he might be later 20s.
Yeah, because it seems like he's been around forever. Because he started out with the Patriots and he's been bouncing around. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. I like Roberts. I think he'd be a good fit. I think if you're not going to bring back Kyle Van Noy, I think Landon is a good option to bring in to fill that leadership role, fill that kind of hybrid linebacker edge type role. Certainly somebody I considered. I decided to go a different way with my linebacker position, but that's one signing that I would not object to. I think he would help with the run game. I think if you're looking to bring in a veteran linebacker, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about the linebacker position here in a minute, but I think what you're really looking to do is just find somebody who is better and steadier and more consistent than Kenneth Murray. Because ideally you'd want that person to be taking Kenneth Murray off the field. At least I do. I don't know what the Chargers do, but that's what I want. So, and I think Roberts does that. Roberts isn't flashy. He isn't going to make a ton of plays. He's not, he's not going to make the Pro Bowl if they sign him. But he's steady. He knows his job. They can put him in a position to do the things that he does well and maybe hide him a little bit so that he doesn't have to do the things he doesn't do so well. And he fills that leadership void that you lose with Kyle Van Noy leaving. And I think it's a smart move, and it's just that steady. It kind of raises the floor of the linebacker group, which I think they need. So,
yeah,
I think that's a good signing.
And he's going to be 28 this season, so up there, but yeah, not 30 quite yet. All right, well, let's talk about it here. Next up here, we talked about edge. Next up is linebacker. And I've got, and I believe Jamie does too, but we'll leave that up to mystery for, I can't remember if this is the one we repeated or not, but I've got 49ers linebacker Azeez Al-Shire. The Niners have Fred Warner. They have Dre Greenlaw. They locked them both up and will most likely let Al-Shire hit free agency. He's coming off a knee injury, that cut his season short. But as a will, he is a great run defender. And in 2021, he had his best season filling in for Dre Greenlaw when he went down with an injury. He finished with 102 tackles, 2 sacks, interception. And after that season in 21, he signed a second-round tender, which earned him just under $4 million. It was $3.9 million in his deal. That is coming off his best season in 2022. He went down with an injury. In fact, he's got an injury history. He's had 2 knee surgeries, a shoulder surgery. So I think he's more in the $2 to $3 million range just because of the uncertainty. He's only played over 9 games in one season out of the last 4. So a guy that's been plagued with injuries, but because he's only 25 years old, I think he's probably going to get more than just a 1-year deal here. So I've got him in line with Oren Burks with the 49ers and Alex Anzalone's deal with the Lions, which is 2 years, $4.5 million. And I might just have an out after year 1 there, but I think because he's only 25, he's going to get more than 1 year. So I've got 2 years, 4.5. Azeez is a fringe starter when healthy. Kenneth Murray, probably not. So I think this is what Jamie's talking about, keeping Kenneth Murray off the field. He's at worst high-end depth guy. That way you can improve your depth of linebacker. He's got the potential to start. He can compete with Murray in camp and will hopefully play next to Drew Tranquill if they re-sign him. So my guy here in the linebacker group is Azeez Al-Shire.
Yeah, this is where we doubled up. I like Azeez Al-Shire a lot. I think he provides a lot in run support. He's flashed in coverage. He's shown he can get to the quarterback when he's asked to. He fills a lot of needs, and this is a little bit different. I was talking earlier about kind of raising the floor and getting Murray off the field. I think if Al-Shire stays healthy, I think this more than raises the floor. I think it raises the ceiling of the group too. And you probably get a guy who assuming he stays healthy, far and away exceeds the contract that he signs and gets a huge bag the next time he signs a contract. I have him a little higher than you. I went back and forth on, do you offer him 2 years? Do you offer him 1? I settled on 1. I would not object to offering him 2. I have him at $4.5 million a year just because he's 25. He has had 1 really good year. He's kind of in the same boat as like Kaiser was last year and as Tranquill is this year, where he had 1 huge year, but he's been banged up. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. He hasn't been able to put it together consistently for more than 1 year in a row. But I think Shire, I mean, he is a huge upgrade. This is not just like find somebody who's, average and stick him in there and it's an improvement. This is a low risk, high reward kind of a signing, whether it's 1 year for 2, where you grab him, you put him on the field. And I think he significantly improves the play of the linebacker group, particularly if they retain Drew Tranquil. So I think this would be a really smart kind of value rebuilding buy for the Chargers to get somebody who's young, who's shown he can play at a high level, and hope that he steps in and really grabs a hold of that spot.
Okay, yeah, so we agree there on Aziz. I really do think if this is a could really pay off. This could be a good bang for your buck signing here.
Whether they sign, and that I think it's true whether they sign Tranquil or not. I think this is the kind of move, one of the few moves that we're going to talk about tonight, that even if they sign Drew, they should try to make this happen.
Yeah,
because it changes the entire makeup of the second level of defense.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, the next group here in free agency is corner. Bryce Callahan is a free agent. J.C. Jackson's future is up in the air. There's a lot of depth guys. I know they drafted a lot of DBs, but cornerback is still kind of up in the air with Michael Davis and everybody else. So let's talk about CB depth here.
Yeah, so I think this is like a really under the radar important position group for the Chargers this season. You mentioned JC's hurt. We don't know when or if he's going to be back in 2023. They have Michael Davis. They have Zont. Zont may or may not be better suited to playing in the slot. I know they're really high on Jasir Taylor, but he's really just a slot guy. Might have some safety upside. Probably not somebody you want on the outside on a consistent basis. Leonard is still very much a project, an unknown. We don't know what the future holds for him. I think they need some veteran depth to kind of stabilize things. I mean, right now they have 4 healthy corners. And assuming they don't bring Callahan back, which is the assumption that we're making right now, I think they need somebody who's shown he can play at this level, somebody who's got some athleticism, maybe some length, somebody who can maybe play on the outside and allow them to play on the inside. So I went with somebody who he's a former second-round pick. He's got great length. He's got great speed. He's 1 year removed from a really, really good season, but he got hurt at the end of that season and came back to find his team had drafted 2 new corners, and he was out of a job. And that is former Browns cornerback Greedy Williams. Not somebody that I'd throw a bunch of money at, but I feel like Williams is a guy who can play on the outside. He's a lot like Davis. He's got the length. He can be physical. He's got the ball skills. He can run. He fits what the Chargers like in their corners. And I think they might prefer to have Zont playing inside versus outside. And even if not, even if he winds up winning, say, a slot position, I think they've improved the defense. And, worst case scenario, he comes in on a 1 year deal because this is a guy who really needs to rebuild some value. He comes in on a 1 year deal. Worst case scenario, he's really, really good depth. If Leonard and or Taylor beat him out on the depth chart, you just know you've got somebody you can fall back on, because right now they're 4 deep and they need to be at least 5, if not 6 deep. So Williams is a guy I would look at really hard. I don't think he's going to cost a lot of money because he only had 1 good year in Cleveland, and he did not play really much at all this year. Was banged up, did not play well when he was on the field. So Williams is my guy. It's 1 year, $2 million, somewhere around maybe $850,000 to $1 million guaranteed. Just get him in, have him compete against the young corners. I just think it's a smart move to get some veteran depth, somebody with some upside, somebody who hasn't reached his ceiling yet, and honestly has a whole lot of athletic upside and ball skills. I think it would be a really smart move for them.
I love this. He was, early in the process during that 2019 draft class, he was CB1 for most of that early draft talk. And then as the process started going, his draft stock fell a little bit, but he was in that group of one of the better corners of that draft class and really kind of came into I don't want to say a bad system, but with the Browns, with all the coaching turnover, them drafting corners high anyway, it felt like Greedy never really got his shot. And it would be a real good, not only veteran sighting to help compete with the young guys like you mentioned, but maybe get some upside out of a guy that really hasn't hit his potential quite yet, and could probably be due for a change of scenery.
Yeah, and with as much as the Chargers played press and man coverage down the stretch last year, Greedy is long, he's athletic, he's really built for that press scheme. I think he gives them some more options to be aggressive with the coverages, and gives them some flexibility in the slot. Whether it's Zont, whether it's Taylor, some kind of a rotation, whatever it might be. I just think it makes that secondary. I think it has the potential to make the secondary that much better, even after losing Callahan.
Yeah. I like it. That's a good one. All right. So my pick here in corner, I had a kind of a different, kind of the same, but a different approach here in terms of my corner. And that is looking to be more versatile, a guy that could play inside and out. The guy that I picked is Isaiah Oliver. He's the Falcons corner. He's a nickel corner coming off a strong end of last season. He's kind of been in and out of the lineup in Atlanta because of injuries. Was given an opportunity this past season, and he had a really, really big impact. He could play multiple spots. He's also only 26 years old. He's smart, instinctive, but the injuries, the coaching changeover in Atlanta, it kind of hurt Oliver. But once he got healthy, he flashed that potential last year. He was injured in 2021, which was the contract year. So he signed a prove-it deal in Atlanta last offseason, which was 1 year, $2.35 million. I've got Isaiah Oliver in the price range with another versatile corner in Quan Williams and the deal he signed with the Broncos, a guy that can play inside and out like Isaiah Oliver. I've got it because he's young. I've got a 2-year, $5.2 million deal here for Isaiah Oliver. I just love the speed and versatility here. You've got kind of that vet presence here, a guy who is really fast and versatile, very good play speed, being able to play nickel corner. The injuries held him back, so I don't think he's going to get a ton on the open market. But this is a guy that has a lot of starting potential, and at the very least, very good depth. He's young. This could really very well be a huge steal if you can get him healthy and playing. Kind of like Greedy Williams, he taps in that potential too. So kind of a different approach, but another guy. I love the versatility and I love the play speed. Now, it doesn't have the length that Greedy does, but I just love getting faster and more versatile with a guy like Isaiah Oliver.
Yeah, that's another good one. I remember liking him as a sleeper when he was in that draft. So that's a solid one. I like that.
Yeah. All right. So last defensive position here. And Leo, thanks for the comment about loving the show. And we appreciate you tuning in here. All right. So last here on defense is free safety. Nasir Adderley is a free agent. I don't think the Chargers can meet his price range, so he is most likely out. And
or should they, by the way?
Yeah, we both wouldn't have signed Nas anyway. JT Woods, Project Alohi Gilman, Alohi, however you say it, I get it wrong every time. Gilman has proven to not quite be a dependable starter. So let's talk about some vet free safeties here on the market. And I'll go ahead and start. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you know this name because I brought him up a lot. I really, really, really didn't want to pick him because I feel like it's becoming a bit at this point. But I picked Duron Harmon, formerly of the Patriots, the Lions, and Raiders, a whole slew of teams. But he was my favorite option here in a very barren free safety market. Even at 31, he still got the ball skills on the back end. With the Raiders, he had his best season in the last 3 years. He's had 2 or more interceptions in the last 6 seasons with 4 different teams. So it doesn't matter the system. He produces consistent turnovers. And with Gilman and Woods kind of being up in the air right now. Harmon would be a really nice starter while Woods is still developing. He signed a 1-year, $1.2 million deal with the Raiders last year. He's now going to be 32 this season. I would say it's about the same here. 1 year, maybe $1 to $1.5 million, real low cost, kind of a stopgap here at free safety. He's a 1-year rental, but he would really, really improve the back end. If the Chargers pass rush is anywhere near effective, Deron Harmon can really collect some nice turnovers as a center fielder, as a free safety, a sure tackler, even at this age. Showed he still got it with the Raiders last year. So my guy here is the free safety, Deron Harmon.
I looked at the list and I said, Garrett's going to pick Deron Harmon. I knew it.
Yep.
So you mentioned a bit, you mentioned talking about guys that we've talked about in the past. I have a similar pick.
Yeah.
And this is somebody that we talked about a lot in the early days of the show. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised he's still in the league. But if you look at his numbers, he's still productive. And I think he's at that point. I think he's 32. He's at that point where he's going to be year to year. He's not going to get a big contract. So my pick is free safety Tayshawn Gibson, formerly of the 49ers. Gibson is a guy who is always around the football. He can play center field. He can play split safety. I think he's even played some strong safety in the past. Terrific ball skills, a ton of range, gets a ton of PBUs, 5 picks last year for the 49ers. He is, I think, in my opinion, the perfect fit for the Chargers safety room. If the goal is to kind of slow play Woods and work him in and hopefully reduce Gilman's role a little or a lot, I think Gibson is a guy who takes a lot of pressure off of Derwin, because if you've got Gibson in the back end, you probably don't feel like you need to play Derwin deep as much as the Chargers did last year. Mm-hmm. I think that just frees him up to be closer to the line of scrimmage, frees Derwin up to be closer to the line of scrimmage, which has to be a goal for this defense, because the closer Derwin is to the line of scrimmage, the better the defense is as a whole, and the better Derwin is. So Tayshawn Gibson's my guy. I went with a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. I think for a guy like him, he's going to be productive as long as he's on the field. I would guarantee most, if not all, of his salary, just to make sure that you get him in the door. He shouldn't require a 2-year deal just because he's 32, I think. And he's been kind of floating around from year to year for the last couple of years. But I really think Gibson fits this team perfectly. He's that center fielder that they wanted Naz to be. He has the ball skills. He has the instincts. He can cover a ton of ground. He can tackle. So I think this is the perfect fit for the Chargers.
Yeah, this was my number 2 pick here. I went back and forth on Tayshawn Gibson and Deron Harmon, which, if you guys are OGs to this podcast, names you've heard from the very beginning. Guys, we've been pounding the table for when Gibson was with the Browns.
Then Jags.
He went to the Jags. Yeah.
Yep.
And now after the 49ers. Yep. So, all right. Yeah, no, I love that pick. I would be good with either one of those guys. I think Tayshawn Gibson would be a excellent fit here. I love those 2 picks from you there, Jamie. Greedy Williams and then Tayshawn Gibson. Those are 2 good. All right. So let's move on to offense. So those are kind of the important roles there on defense, most of them that we wanted to cover today. Let's go ahead and do offensive free agents. One that's huge. And Jamie, Jason's right. Any reason why you didn't mention Jaleel Adai? Is it just because you hate him, or
because he sucks?
Okay, that'd be a good reason why. Trey Boston.
I think that ship has sailed.
If we're going down trip down memory lane here. All right. Well, let's go to offense. Obviously, one of the bigger needs here for the Chargers, in terms of anything here, is wide receiver. A lot of talk about drafting a wide receiver at 21, who they might draft. There's a lot of talk about it. This is a big need. So let's talk about some free agent options at wide receiver.
So this First of all, anybody who's been listening to us for a long time knows that we detest spending money on wide receivers in the free agent market. I think the exception to that rule, and it really has become a rule for us, is, low end kind of bargain basement buys to fill out the depth chart. Guys like DeAndre Carter last year.
DeAndre Carter. Yep. Andre Roberts.
So
the year before.
What's that?
I said, and Andre Roberts the year before. Yeah,
exactly. So I went with somebody who I think is not going to command a whole lot of interest on the market. Somebody who has had some spots of production, but hasn't been super productive. I think he fits a need the Chargers have, which is he can run. He is elusive. He has some twitch.
He can run. That's a good start. Okay.
He'd be the guy who could take that, 10-yard slant, 75 yards for a touchdown if you hit him. No, it's not Mecole Hardman. I went with Trent Sherfield, formerly of the Dolphins. Not a standout name, not somebody who's been super productive, but he had his best year last year with Tua. He can run. He catches the ball well, doesn't have a big problem with drops, and he can run and make people miss. And it's something that those are things the Chargers desperately need. So I went with Sherfield, and I think he could fit at the back end and take some pressure off the Chargers in terms of taking a wide receiver early. They would still need to get a wide receiver, at least one wide receiver in the draft, in my opinion, but it would at least buy some time. And I think he would provide some options for them in the passing game. And the contract that I came up with, since he is young and he is coming off his best year, I have a 2-year, $6 million contract with $2 million guaranteed. I would guarantee as much as I could up front and have an out after the first year.
Okay. Yeah. A name I was looking at for sure. So like Jamie mentioned, this is obviously a depth wide receiver. You're not going to hear about Hardman or any of the top wide receivers here on this list. Mine is a name, obviously not a household name either. It is Richie James, was with the 49ers, recently with the Giants. This is a veteran speed option here over DeAndre Carter, who may or may not be back. James is both a returner and a receiver, which is a plus for me. Dable didn't work James in the lineup until late in the year, but he played 7 of the last 8 games for the Giants when they were doing that whole playoff push. During that span, he had 37 receptions, 378 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He finished the season with his best output of his career, thanks to getting expanded playing time at the end of the season. He showed he could be an explosive weapon down the field, which is something the Chargers obviously need. Somebody who can run, and that's a guy like Richie James. He signed a 1-year, $1 million deal last offseason. It's probably going to be the same. He didn't, set the Giants roster on fire, didn't pad his stats, even though he had a strong end of the year. Throughout the whole season, he had some fumbling issues. He had obviously some kind of coaching issues because he's in and out of the lineup. But I've got him at a low, maybe $1 to $2 million for 1 year, kind of a rental. The Chargers are going to have to draft a speed option, but having a guy like Richie James on the roster would be nice to not only offer some speed, but also some depth at returner. So my guy here is Richie James.
The other name I considered here, but I think he winds up being too expensive, is Darius Slayton.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
That would be more of a permanent solution and really kick the can down the road on drafting a wide receiver, but that was somebody I considered here.
Yeah. All right. So next up, tight end, another big need for the Chargers. Lots of question marks in that room. Gerald Everett, while the starter, they could obviously get better. And then everybody behind Everett is really a question mark, from Parham to McKitty and everybody else. So, in terms of tight end, what I like wide receiver in my mind, the Chargers are going to have to draft the tight end, obviously. They're not going to find their starter in their price range on the free agent market. So for me, the guy here that I'm signing is a depth option here at tight end, and is the Jaguars tight end, Dan Arnold. And that's where he comes in. It is definitely not Dalton Schultz, as the chat is saying. Arnold, for me, veteran blocking tight end. He hasn't had a receiving touchdown in 4 years. So this is strictly just depth as a blocker between McKitty and Everett, and probably Donald Parham, who they'll have back. they could really use a blocking tight end in that group. Dan Arnold is that guy. He got a contract. I got him in the same range as the Chiefs veteran blocking tight end, Blake Bell. And his deal that he signed recently was 1 year, $1.2 million. I've got the same range there. Dan Arnold fills in as a blocking tight end. At worst, a body to compete with Trey McKitty and the other tight ends in the middle and back end of the roster. This is just a depth tight end 3-4 on your roster here, a guy that you bring in on early downs to help block. A really, really good blocking tight end. But obviously, if you're looking for a starter, you're not going to find this on this list, and they're going to want to draft one anyway. So for me, I've got a veteran tight end here in Dan Arnold.
I went down a similar path, a familiar path. I went with Steven Anderson.
Oh,
and I went with Steven Anderson because he can contribute on special teams, he can block, he can catch, and he can run. These are all things the Chargers need, and these are all things your tight end 3 or 4 should be able to do. Mm-hmm. I realize it's probably unlikely that they bring him back, but if I was looking for, say, a tight end 3, I think it's pretty clear at this point that Steven Anderson is a better football player than Trey McKitty. Mm-hmm. You can talk about upside and potential, things that I still don't really particularly see in Trey McKitty. He has not lived up to the hype as a blocker coming out of college. He has not developed very well as a receiver. I don't think he's particularly useful. I think he was a big problem in the run game this year, missing blocks, being late to assignments, just flat out falling on his ass. He just was not very good. And you can slide Anderson in. He's going to be familiar with the system, and he's going to produce and do whatever you ask him to do. And he can also play fullback and H-back as a lead blocker. He gives you so many options, and he makes you so flexible. I think it makes a ton of sense. It probably won't happen, but it makes sense. And I'm in the same ballpark as you. I'm at a 1-year deal, about $1.5 million. And because he's a veteran, because I think he's worth it, I would guarantee most, if not all, of his salary, just because I think he's a good football player, and he is exactly what you want a depth tight end to be in terms of special teams flexibility, positional flexibility, and skill set flexibility. He does everything you need him to do. So I think he'd be a perfect fit. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes some sense there. Surprised to even let him go in the first place, to be honest with you. There's a guy a guy we both thought they should have brought back. And went to the Cardinals, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we got 2 more groups here. Next up here is center. Corey Linsley, obviously the starter. But behind Linsley, it was a mess this past season. Will Clapp is not the answer. So we're looking at another veteran center here. Who you got on the free agent market in center?
I went with Scott Quesenberry, another familiar name.
Another old face.
Yep. Another familiar face. He's familiar with the system. He can play center. He can play guard. He gives him some options in terms of depth. He's that kind of swing interior lineman. The Chargers are in a position right now where I think they either need to find a really good backup center on the free agent market, or they need to draft somebody in the early to middle rounds who they feel can step up and replace Corey Linsley when he eventually moves on. I would rather not use a draft pick on an interior lineman right now. Full disclosure, I haven't studied the interior lineman yet, but I feel like they have an opportunity to really make themselves better in the early and middle rounds with guys who will get on the field and play. And I would hate to draft a center and have him sit for 2 or 3 years behind Linsley. So I would rather kick the can down the road on this one. I think this is a position where you can afford to do that. And I think Quesenberry is a very easy plug and play backup center who, can step in and play if Linsley gets hurt. And it's not like having Clapp out there, puking all over the field.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I think getting a backup center, a quality backup center, because Lindsey's getting older. Injuries have been happening more and more. They need somebody who can fill in. And I know there's been talk about Zion Johnson eventually moving to center at some point, but that's kind of later anyway. He is the right guard. He's going to be the right guard going into next year. I think getting a veteran center here helps you for a year, maybe two, so that way once Lindsley starts to break down a little bit, or you're looking to, or his deal starts to wind down and all that, you can then start drafting a center and working that out that way. So I'm with you there, and I've got a name that I'm actually kind of excited about. We mentioned a bunch of other names, but on this list, a guy that like I've followed a little bit, and I think it's just a really underrated center in this league, and it's 49ers center Jake Brendel. He served as a starter for the 49ers last year, finished the year off strong. He struggled in the first 6 weeks or so, but finished the year as one of the better centers in the league. He even got a Pro Bowl alternate spot. He is 30. He's played with 4 different teams, including 2 different teams twice. And he signed a 1-year contract for the last 4 years. So he signed his biggest contract last offseason, which was just over $1 million. He deserves a pay bump, but because he's over 30 this season, it'll probably be like a year or 2. I'm thinking he's in line with the Bradley Bozeman contract last year with the Panthers, which was 1 year, $2.8 million. It's a bump. And so I'm offering somewhere 1 year to 2.5 million, somewhere in that range. Because his season was kind of up and down and struggled early on in the year. I don't know that he gets a lot more than that, but I might throw a second year just because you then have 2 years of a starting capable center behind Lindsley for 2 years, and you don't have to really draft one quite yet. So I am there with you. I think Jake Brendel's NFL starter, who's one of the more underrated free agent linemen in this class. He was a staple for the 49ers offensive line going into the playoffs. He's a veteran. Lindsley's been getting injured. This is an easy, you don't lose much. I mean, obviously Lindsley, we've talked about how he's one of the more important players on offense, not named Justin Herbert. And when he goes down, the whole offensive line suffers. This is a guy that you could really plug in and not lose too much away from Lindsley with a guy like Jake Brendel. So I've got Jake Brendel, a guy that I think I would be really excited about as like a backup interior lineman, starting caliber center. Excuse me.
I like it. I think that's a good one.
All right, so we got one more. It is our last one, and it is quarterback 2. Justin Herbert, obviously the starter. Easton Stick, free agent. Chase Daniel, free agent. Both of which, hopefully, they do not re-sign either, in my mind, and they go out and find a quarterback 2, whether it's in the draft or in free agency. But I've got one that's really, really easy to kind of connect the dots on. And it is the Cowboys backup quarterback, Cooper Rush. Obviously, these are easy dots to connect with Kellen Moore and Cooper Rush. Rush showed some promise as a starter. He went 4-1 when Dak got injured. The rub here is some team might see Rush as a starter. I don't know that that any team really will. I don't really buy it. I don't see it. But the other thing is the price range, because I think he might be getting somewhere in the $4 to $6 million range as a high-end backup, kind of a Jacoby Brissett with Cleveland type of deal. I think it's kind of in line with that. It's easy to make that that kind of leap. I don't know if it's in their price range, but I think it's worth going over with the familiarity of Kellen Moore's system, not having to draft a quarterback and all that mess. He probably deserves 2 years, because the Brissett deal was 1 year, $4.6 million. So he's probably going to need 2 because he's a younger guy, maybe a 2-year, $9 million deal. A little pricey, but he's an adequate backup. That he might be able to win you a game or 2. He did with the Cowboys last year if Herbert ever goes down, which is nice. But even though the price is a little rich, this was kind of the exercise, and I'd be okay with this move. I think it's just an easy plug and play QB2 with Cooper Rush, even if it is a little bit on the kind of expensive side.
That's a solid one. I'd be perfectly fine with that. I came up with a different one. Kind of scoured the market, and the one that I came up with is Gardner Minshew. A easy plug and play backup quarterback, somebody who if Herbert gets hurt and can't play for a few games, if he's out for 3 or 4 games, he's probably going to win you a couple of them, if not all of them. He's going to put up some numbers. He's going to move the football. He's going to make his mistakes, but he's a backup quarterback. What do you expect? He can run around. He can make plays with his legs, makes plays with his arm, gives you a chance. And I think that last part, he gives you a chance, something you couldn't say about the last 2 backup quarterbacks.
No.
And I think if you have Minshew, there is no need to have a third quarterback, which is something we've been harping on for 8 years, 9 years. So
as long as we've been doing it. Yep.
And this is somebody that I would, I'd sign for 2 years, just because I don't want them to be in a position where they have to draft a quarterback for the next couple of years. So I would sign Minshew for 2 years. I think I'd offer him about $2 million a year, guarantee about half of it. Maybe give yourself the opportunity to get out if you need to after year 1. But I think he's a guy that you could be really comfortable with giving for 2 years, and not really have to worry about cutting him or him underperforming if he gets on the field. He's going to make plays, and he's going to give you a chance to win.
Yep. And something Nathan's bringing up in the comments here, giving your other players a chance in preseason. We didn't really get to see how these wide receiver in the middle of the depth chart performed because Easton Stick and Chase Daniel just flat out sucked. So to get a starting caliber quarterback in like a Cooper Rush or a Gardner Minshew, it gives you're able to actually evaluate your receivers and tight ends and running backs because you got a quarterback who could actually get them the ball. So yes, very good point, Nathan. And that's I'm all for it. Getting a veteran backup quarterback, and I'm good with Minshew too, especially if he's half the cost as a guy like Cooper Rush, who I think is probably going to get a little bit more on the market just because of the 4-1 record when Dak went down.
Right.
All right. Well, so we're good here. That's it. Thanks for joining us late on a Tuesday, and we're going to be doing drafts here on out. We got a bunch of draft nuggets on the Discord. We'll be dropping those soon. If you're not part of the Patreon, go join that. Join the Discord. Kind of gives us a little bit of a look at their draft board, just a little bit of a peek and some of the positions they might be leaning in the first round and even going into day 2 and day 3. So check that out. We got that on Discord. We appreciate you guys, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, and I would just add to that real quick. Keep an eye out for potentially an increase in the amount of content that we're putting out over the next few months.
Okay.
And there may be some fun new announcements, podcast-related announcements about networks and changes to the programming and all that kind of stuff. So
Format
keep
changes.
an eye out for that. We should be able to break that news here probably pretty soon.
Yes. Good tease, Jamie. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.